Hello and welcome to cclive, the show that's dedicated to keeping everyone connected during these extraordinary times. Here's a taste of what's coming up in today's show.
During university years, it was all perfectly fine. And then I joined my first job as a graduate. And there you realise, where are all the women?
I remember when I first started out on my work placement on site, I couldn't even get PPE in ladies' sizes. They had to put an order in for my site boots because I'm a size 4.
Because it's a more male-dominated environment, the guys tend to welcome you in a bit more because they don't want you to feel excluded just because you're a girl.
In the EU, so in the 28 EU countries, 40.5% of engineers are actually women, which is, I was really rather astonished by that.
People welcome you and there's no reason for you to feel left out. You'll be given the same opportunities or even more.
I think anybody out there should be looking at it as a potential career, and if you are interested, I'd just give it a go. If you can get yourself some work experience, even better. There are loads of companies out there that are offering that.
It's another show that's absolutely packed to the rafters for you. Now, in every show, we speak to industry leaders and professionals from across a whole range of sectors who share their expertise and experiences with you. And as always, we give you the chance to get involved too, because we host a live Q&A at the end of every show. To ask a question, simply pop it into the Q&A box below, and we'll be putting as many as we physically can to our guests at the end of the programme. And if you see a question as well that you particularly want to know the answer to, make sure you're using that upvote feature so that we can see that and ask the questions that matter the most to you. You can also get in touch with us on Twitter by using the hashtag cclive, or drop us an email at cclive@cartwrightcommunications.co.uk. Now, today is a very special episode because we're commemorating International Women in Engineering Day 2020, or INWED. It took place on Tuesday. Now, this year's theme is Shape the World. So today you'll be hearing from women across the industry who've made their mark in a sector that is traditionally dominated by men. First up, you'll be hearing from Natalie Clemson at Pick Everard. She joined as a graduate in 2008 and since then has worked her way up. Today, she is a director. She told Tom about her journey.
I started off thinking about engineering when I was at school doing my A-levels, and I did art, music, physics and maths, so it was a good mixture of the arts and the sciences, and I knew I wanted to go to university, but I didn't really know what I wanted to study, and it was a case of, do I want to do maths or do I want to do a bit more of a career-based degree? And I decided the latter, and that's when I started civil engineering, and I just thought, wow, yeah, this sounds really interesting. It's got such a broad range of kind of specialisms that you can go into, and it was a 5-year degree at the University of Bath, joint School of Architecture and Engineering, which I really like the ethos of. It was fantastic. It allowed me to have 2 work placements. So the first one, I actually worked on a construction site on a sewage treatment works. And then my second placement had to be in a design office. So that was in my 4th year, and through my contacts with the contractor that I was working for, my first placement, they recommended that I went to Pick Everard. So I contacted the partner of Pick Everard, Duncan Green, and said, I want to come and work for you. And he showed me around the office, and yeah, I was sold, and then came to Pick Everard for my first work placement in 2006, and I'm still here right now. So I've worked my way up from an undergraduate engineer back in 2006 all the way up to director now in 2020. And now I'm in charge of the highways and infrastructure team.
So during your time in the industry, what sort of changes have you seen when it comes to the roles of women within engineering?
The attitudes have definitely changed towards women in the industry. I feel that things like casual sexism in the workplace is definitely less tolerated now. And similarly on construction sites, you see a lot more women whereas before it was hardly any. I mean, I remember when I first started out on my work placement on site, I couldn't even get PPE in ladies' sizes. They had to put an order in for my site boots because I'm a size 4. So, and it took about 6 weeks to get some site boots. So it's definitely changed a lot in that time. And I am seeing a lot more women coming through into kind of, into engineering now, yeah.
So there has been an increase, which is absolutely great. But why do you think that is? What do you think it is that's driving this kind of increase in women wanting to, learn and get involved in a career in engineering?
I think just generally society is starting to become a bit more equal, and the traditional roles of women in any workplace is starting to change a lot. But also, I think the industry itself is becoming a lot more active in promoting it to women and girls, and I think it's just it's been increasing that awareness over the past kind of 10-15 years that has started to help bring more women into the industry. And I think we're starting to realise that a diverse workplace is really important in terms of skills, and women bring a new type of skill set to the workplace that wasn't really considered before, and women make really good leaders. So I think a lot of employers are starting to kind of catch on to that and are themselves wanting to be more active in that promotion as well.
And Natalie will be joining us for the live Q&A at the end of the programme, so make sure you get your questions in for her now. And remember, you can use that upvote feature if you see a question you particularly want to know the answer to. Now, our next guest began her career 19 years ago as a graduate engineer in 2001. Anna Sassari set up BE Design back in 2013 and has since made it her mission to share her expertise and passion about the industry with the next generation. She told Tom about the work she's been doing to achieve this.
We've been partnered with a couple of schools here in New York, so we've done projects with schools. We've done one with primary school, the Mount in New York, where year 5 and year 6 children can take part, and it was all about building a model. So that went really well. I think we've done that 2 years now. We've also got the REBA East Midlands Students Mentoring Scheme. So one of our architects is running that with students, but it's really trying to get close to these kids while they're at young age and show them how it works in reality, how is engineering, how is working in an office and producing projects, and taking them to site is quite important as well. The other one is really the University of Sheffield, where we've got quite a few of our graduates here. I think we've got four graduates here from the University of Sheffield, and that really happened through the careers events. There's also the Women in Property organisation, and they've got different offices in different parts of the UK. And also there is another careers event in Sleaford with all the grammar schools around the area. Again, we do that with year 12 and year 13, and they can always come in the office for work experience. So we've got, throughout the year, we've got quite a lot of kids coming here for work experience, which is brilliant.
Now, historically, this industry has been dominated by men. Does it ever affect your kind of career path and you wanting to become an engineer?
Not originally. When I first went to university, I didn't even think about it. And in Greece, it's it doesn't matter whether you are a female or a male. So they can all be engineers or architects. There hasn't been this perception in my head. So during university years, it was all perfectly fine. And then I joined my first job as a graduate. And there you realize, where are all the women? You're kind of thinking, what happened? Because during university years, there are quite a few girls, especially international students who are female. And you go to your first office and you think, wow, what happened to all the girls? But you get used to it. And I think to start with is a bit of a shock, but you just need to persevere. And after a couple of years, it just feels normal.
Now, you've obviously been involved in engineering for a long time. You've got a very successful practice yourself. What is it that you enjoy most about the career? What is it that really keeps you waking up in the morning and being excited about going to work?
There are two things. The first one is really all the interaction and communication and collaboration. It's impossible for a project to happen without collaborating with everyone. And these relationships, building relationships, talking to people, I love this part. And the next one is really, which was one of the main reasons I wanted to do engineering, was the fact that you can see the finished product. And it feels you are part of it and you follow it throughout. You can see all the processes, all the stages, and then it's there. You can enjoy it.
Anna will also be available to answer your questions live at the end of the show, so do keep them coming in and we'll be putting as many questions to them as we can very soon. Next up is Daphne Thyssen, founder and director at Thyssen Consulting. Now, she trained as an architectural historian and has actually had an incredibly varied career since then, before deciding to set up her own consultancy business. She told Tom about the generational changes she's seen.
You know, like when I was at university, the engineering faculty was actually next to mine, and whereas we were filled with girlies doing history of art and architecture, obviously next door was lots of blokes. And now, when I'm working with engineering companies, I find there's a lot of young women doing engineering roles and working in engineering capacity. And so that's definitely very positive. And I found out this morning, because I was doing some research, in the EU, so in the 28 EU countries, 40.5% of engineers are actually women, which is, I was really rather astonished by that. And that's a 28% increase since 2007. So it's not just what I've been seeing, it's what actually is in the figures as well.
Things are certainly improving on that front, but the figures in the UK, certainly in comparison to the EU, are fairly low. How can employers go about enticing more women into engineering in the UK?
Employees can start sharing the good news to graduates. You know, you can actually earn a very decent salary when you're working in engineering. That's a nice enticement. We all like to be rewarded according to what we do. Employees can focus more on retention of women. This is across the board, but definitely in technical jobs, is that, you know, the moment female employees get pregnant, there is, they can come back, but then there is childcare issues. There is, there's issues of promotion. You know, they tend to be less, or we think they're less focused, etc. And those bias attitudes are still very much prevalent, also in engineering. And then maybe even employers going into schools. You know, girls tend to be interested in arts and humanities. It doesn't mean they're not interested in mathematics, but they would like a combination of the three, for instance, or a combination of engineering and arts and humanities. And of course, those exist, but they are very rarely pointed out.
Looking towards the future, do you see a point when it ever is going to be 50-50? You know, by the sounds of it, we're getting quite close to it with the EU figures. Yeah. But do you think that it's ever going to get to the point where it's 50-50? And what kind of changes are going to have to be made to make that happen?
Given the figure is 40.5, I'm pretty positive. But I'm also aware that role models, we need a lot more female role models in the industry. There's only 18% of STEM companies have women on boards, and there are only like 3 or 4 women on those boards. We need a lot more than that. We also need an encouragement of female networking. Traditionally men tend to look after each other in companies. Women are not so good at that, and it's not just in engineering, but again, also in engineering, I would say, look after other women. When we look after each other, we can then push each other. We can help your ambition. We can help you. We can point out things to you. What I've seen in my line of work, which is by no means restricted only to my line of work. It was definitely in all kinds of is that women, they tend to go up in the world, they come to director level and maybe higher, and tend to isolate themselves from other women. Which is a shame, and it's we need to have those women to actually talk to younger women and entice them to get to be there. And then maybe apprenticeships. I've not mentioned it before, but again, you know, when apprenticeships are big in STEM industry, and I think they should put more emphasis on women in those apprenticeships.
It's so amazing to hear some truly inspirational stories from the women who've spoken to us so far today. And the good news is we've still got time for some more. Alison Horton joined built environment consultancy Curtins as a project engineer back in 2014. Now a principal engineer, she's got a real passion for encouraging young people to pursue jobs in STEM-related careers. And she told Tom about the decision she made to become an ambassador.
I've officially been a STEM ambassador since 2013, but prior to that I was doing STEM-related events, and I didn't even realise I was doing it. During my placement year, one of my colleagues got me involved in the paper challenge with the ICE, and we went to primary schools and we built bridges out of newspaper that the children then loaded up with beanbags to see whose bridge could hold the most weight. We did a similar exercise with A-level students as well at Coventry Uni. So this was all something new to me, something I'd never done before, but I found it really sort of enjoyable. I really enjoyed engaging with the students, talking to them about the bridges, about what they were building, and especially with the A-level students, sort of letting them know what their career possibilities were, what they were studying, what they wanted to do at university, and that sort of thing. So after I'd been to uni and I went back to be a graduate engineer, I decided to enrol as a STEM ambassador officially.
Do you think days like International Women in Engineering Day, I suppose it's all forms part of a sort of story of education and bringing everything together, but do you think days like International Women in Engineering Day have an impact, or is it more that kind of early intervention ambassador type stuff that you think is the most important thing?
I think days like International Women in Engineering Day have their place. Their aim is to promote what we do. It's to educate people on what we do, give them an awareness to what we do. But it also gives us an opportunity to celebrate what we do as engineers. But I find it sad that we have to have such a day sometimes. So why should we have to have a women's specific engineering day? It should be about celebrating engineering in general. And it should be about providing an awareness to everybody. I mean, I saw a lot of stuff on LinkedIn yesterday, lots of people talking about it all week, and I just think that sometimes we limited the market to which we show this information. Sometimes it's just aimed at professionals already in the industry, and it needs to get down to the masses. It needs to get down to the general public, and that's where I think the STEM days and the STEM ambassadors provide a vital role there. I think they allow you to get close to the students and to the teachers, and to show that what we do to the masses rather than through the rest of the industry.
We hear from a couple of young civil engineers later on in the programme. Is there any advice that you could give to youngsters looking to get into engineering that may be potentially a little bit reticent about doing so?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, everybody sees it as a masculine thing, and it's not at all. The maths and the physics are an important part of all kinds of engineering, but it's so much more than that. It's such a creative thing to be doing. It's about organisation, management skills, people skills, communication skills, all those things that everybody has. It's not that you need to be an expert or a computer whiz in maths or anything like that. It's very much about a holistic approach to designing something, about being creative, about coming up with ideas, working as a team. And I think anybody out there should be looking at it as a potential career. And if you are interested, I'd just give it a go. If you can get yourself some work experience, even better. There are loads of companies out there that are offering that. And you can just give it a taste and see whether it's for you or not. But I'd definitely give it a go. Definitely worth it.
Thank you so much to all of the women who have spoken to us today. There have been some really interesting insights from all of them. I'll be starting a Q&A in just a moment with Natalie and Anna, but before I do that, we did launch a poll earlier on in the episode. Most of you have answered that, but there are a few of you left that haven't. So if you'd like to answer the poll, because we'll be reacting to that very shortly. But now I am joined by Anna and Natalie. Thank you for joining me, both of you. How are you?
Thanks, yeah, good.
Good. How are you,
Thank
Anna?
you for having us. Yes, really well. Thank you. Thank you for organising it.
Not at all. Lovely to have you here. Now, the first question, Natalie, that I've got is for you. Is there anything in particular that you think women bring to the industry that men maybe don't?
Oh, that's a really good question. I do. And I think women are more empathetic, and they can provide a good listening ear. I think sometimes, I mean, I'm totally generalizing here, but sometimes men are kind of more focused on their career progression. Women are kind of are focused on their career progression too, but I feel that they are more empathetic towards kind of teamwork, and it's just a completely different skill set that is often lacking in this industry, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Anna, have you got anything that you'd like to add to that?
I was going to mention softer skills.
Yeah.
Obviously, you cannot have one without the other. We wouldn't be able to, be here without any men contributing. So it's really the diversity and having both working together, collaborating.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, Anna, you mentioned in your interview that in Greece, it doesn't seem to have the same gender stereotypes in engineering as we maybe do here in the UK. Why do you think that might be?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think, and that's my personal opinion, I think one of the differences, the main differences I've seen, especially looking and talking to people who come here, to people that come here for work experience, is the perception that the boys love maths and the girls love arts and English. I think in Greece, the reality is that everyone is really strong on both. And there is really the career path during the school years, they put emphasis on both, and you end up going to the high school and even college, and you had really both working on all subjects at the same kind of level. So there's no perception that girls cannot do math. It's probably a tradition. It's like a lot of the women want to feel quite strong about it, and they go for it. So we don't really see the difference. I think that's the main reason. But yeah.
I suppose the follow-up question to that is, how do we break these stereotypes that we do seem to have in the UK?
It is all the work that we're trying to do with the schools from even primary school level, and make sure that the girls don't really get this perception to get in their heads and stop them from doing what they can amazingly do. I was looking at some statistics just before we started on girls that have joined the engineering degrees in university, and 79.8% of them got a first or an upper second, comparing to 74.6%, which is the boys. So it shows that they're both equally capable. So it's just reinforcing that and making sure that starts from the early years.
Absolutely, definitely. Now, this next question is for both of you. So, Natalie, I'll come to you first for this one. In her interview, Daphne mentioned the issue of retention. Have either of you got any recommendations on what companies can do to try and ensure that their female employees are kept in the industry?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question as well. I think it's offering things like family-centric kind of benefits. So making the family unit a very kind of open thing to talk about. So I think traditionally, obviously, men kind of came to the workplace, women stayed at home and looked after the children. But for me, that's not the case. And for a lot of other families, that's not the case. So it's kind of providing the opportunities for men as well to have that flexibility to be a parent and not just be somebody who goes out to work. So I know at Pick Everard we're currently drafting up something called our family contract, which is looking, obviously with everything that's been going on with COVID, we're all having to work more flexibly at home. So it's really looking at that, plus looking at what does that flexibility do to the picture of the workforce? Can it encourage more women into the industry? And I think that's a definite yes, and retain.
Absolutely. Anna, have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
Flexibility is key, and we have seen it as well. We are very flexible, and as Natalie said, with COVID, it's now been easier to stay at home and look after the kids and still do the work, so it's not a problem. I would say there is also perception about salaries, and that's not something I have experienced in our company. We were trying to be very, very to have equality, but I've been reading a lot about salaries, and males have high salaries than equivalent female in the engineering sector. So again, trying to break those stereotypes and making sure that all companies are really, they are reinforcing the equality and making sure salaries are true reflection of capability rather than gender. That is quite key.
Absolutely, and complete transparency in that as well, I'd imagine, which can be not so easy to get, I suppose, in some ways. Now, we'll come back to you both in just a moment, because we've heard from some fantastic women so far today who have very much established themselves in the world of engineering. So it's time now to hear from a couple of young women who are up-and-coming talents in the industry. Husna and Laura are both apprentices at DICE Consulting, and they spoke to Tom about what it was that initially drew them into the world of civil engineering.
I really enjoyed engineering, like science and maths and things like that in school. So I had an interest from early on, and then I enjoy like building things and making things that I can then see what I've done in person. So engineering seemed like quite a good field to go into, because you design things and then a couple of years later, once they're constructed and people are living in houses, for example, you can go and see those houses that you've built or helped to build and design.
That seems like a common theme, actually. I've had that response from quite a few people. Husna, was it similar for you?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I'm just a very practical person, so being able to design things with your own hands, basically, it just it empowers you once you see the final design.
And Husna, historically, the industry has been kind of dominated by men. It's still percentage-wise a lot more men doing the job than women. Did that ever affect you in wanting to sort of take this on as a career path?
It's never affected me, as I've been in situations where in classrooms it's been all men before, so it's never really impacted me in a way.
And how about you, Laura? Did you ever have that kind of any problems with it being a male-dominated industry, or has it actually been quite practical and useful for you?
I'd never say I've had any problems. If anything, I'd say it's been a bit more welcoming, because it's a more male-dominated environment. The guys tend to welcome you in a bit more because they don't want you to feel excluded just because you're a girl. So I feel like I'm more included than I potentially would be if I was a guy, which is quite helpful. So I probably get more opportunities as well with things like interviews like this and International Women's Day and things like that. So I'd say it's a benefit, if anything.
And Husna, is there any, for any young women that may be watching this and considering potentially taking up a career in engineering, is there anything that any advice that you can give for them going forward?
Like Laura said, people welcome you, and there's no reason for you to feel left out. You'll be given the same opportunities or even more when going into engineering. So you'll always find something that you enjoy.
And Laura, any tips for potentially any young women watching this that may be interested in becoming an engineer?
Oh, just try your hardest in all your fields, and you learn things as you go along. So I wouldn't worry if you don't pick things up straight away, because it's so easy to pick things up when you're working in the field. And so you get help from everybody, whether they're guys, girls. There's a lot more girls coming into the engineering industry as well. So that's kind of a benefit. Like the business is taking on a few more women. So we then have a bit of a clique at work where we've got the girls there. So that's helpful. And the guys are always on hand. So yeah, just don't worry too much about it being a male-dominated environment and do what you normally do.
Lovely to hear from Laura and Husna there at DICE. Both of you, isn't it nice to hear that they've both said that neither of them experienced any kind of different treatment in a negative way because they were a woman? Do you think that shows a change in kind of recent years? Natalie, I'll come to you first.
Yes, I was nodding along to Laura, because I think I've experienced the same thing, that you kind of feel a bit more welcomed because you're kind of a bit of a a novelty. Oh, it's a woman. But in a really nice way, and it's kind of easier to stand out. So it does feel really positive. And yeah, it's nice to hear that they've not experienced any negativity, because I know when I started there was a few comments that I had, especially when I was working on a construction site. I think slightly different atmosphere than in an engineering design office. But yeah, it's so nice to hear.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I agree with Natalie. It's actually the same experience. Working in an office is a completely different environment. It's very welcoming, and construction sites are definitely improving. So if I compare them now with what it was 19 years ago, it's completely different. There's the traditional way of approaching engineering and women engineers has really changed a lot positively.
No, definitely, absolutely. It was so nice to hear from both of them, and I know they're both watching today, so thank you for tuning in, both of you. Next question we've got for Natalie. Do you think there is a hesitation from men of any seniority wanting to openly discuss barriers to women due to the risk of there being, an awkward or uncomfortable conversation?
I can only offer my experience on this one, I guess, and from my experience, no, it's been the opposite. My my kind of line manager and the partner of Pick Everard have been just brilliant, and there's always been a very big push to promote the industry to women. So I don't think so. No,
Anna, would you agree with that?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's definitely good to hear. That's the answer I'm sure they were wanting. Now, this question is for both of you. You've both offered a lot of advice and kind of explained all of your experience and your careers to us today. So if you had to cherry pick one piece of advice, what is the piece of advice you'd offer to someone who's considering starting a career as an engineer? Anna, we'll come to you first.
I was going to say, just be strong about it and have confidence. And then everything will happen naturally, and you definitely succeed. As long as you put the effort and do not believe in any barriers that do not necessarily exist because of perceptions. So just be open and hardworking, and it will happen.
Natalie?
I agree. Yeah, believe in yourself and don't doubt yourself. And I think a lot of women tend to hold back and think, I'm not ready to move up yet into promotion because I'm not 100% perfect at doing what I'm doing now. So it's a case of no, just go for it, and you can do it. That's what I've learned over the past kind of, I would say, 2 years. And I've had a lot of help, and I know she's on the call, Sarah, from a corporate coach. So yeah, it's just getting that confidence is key, really. Yeah.
I know it's a cliche, but it's true. No one is perfect, and I suppose it's really important that people do remember that, isn't there, when they're having like a crisis of confidence, I suppose. Anna, this next one is for you. How important do you think it is for female graduates to see women in more senior roles, like yourself and Natalie? And what can we do to get even more women into those positions?
Yeah, it's definitely very important, and for sure, especially when you are recruiting. A lot of the careers events that we do in universities, I tend to go along and just meet the undergraduates, and you can see that as soon as you've got the woman there, you get the female kind of students coming to you and talking to you and asking questions and being more comfortable talking to you. So I think it is very important, and it should be promoted even more, and especially through careers events and mentoring programs.
I mean, I know you do a lot of those mentoring programs like you mentioned earlier on in the show, so I can imagine that question was perfect for you. Now, Natalie, this next one. For anyone who's maybe watching this, who has already had a kind of beginning of a career or an established career maybe in another industry, do you think there's enough opportunity to join engineering later on in your career rather than through the traditional educational route?
there are definitely opportunities to do that. Whether there's enough or not, I'm not sure. Or whether they're advertised enough, I'm not sure, promoted. I think a lot of people just think, oh, to be an engineer, I need to go to university and get a degree, whereas that's not the case at all. You can do work-based placements with a kind of a day release at college or university, and work your way up that way. I mean, the Institute of Civil Engineers has various levels of membership to it, so you don't have to just be a chartered engineer, you can become a technician engineer, and there's a massive shortage actually at the moment for technicians, and the industry really needs people that are looking at a technician route. Just having that skill set is vital really to kind of having that holistic team. So yes, there are definitely lots of opportunities, it's just whether or not they're advertised enough yet, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and definitely really important for people to know that they don't have to do that traditional university route if that's maybe not for them. So it's really good to know. Anna, this question is from Yasmin Nally. How important is it to have a mentor, and do you have any guidance on finding one?
Yes, I would say very important. There will be points in everyone's career, including that you get your low, or you feel like you don't know how to get out of a situation, and it's so important to have someone to talk to. So I would say if you can have a mentor. There have been times in my career that there hasn't been let's say a formal mentor, but people that have played the role of a mentor, and that's something that clicked, and it made so much sense and gave me all the confidence and inspired me to do something or to carry on working when you think I don't want to do this anymore. So I think it's so important to have a mentor and carry on. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. I think at every level, having someone there to support you is a nice comfort blanket.
No, definitely. And Natalie, you're nodding along there because I know that earlier you mentioned mentors. So I imagine that you could kind of go on about them forever because of how important they've been to you personally as well.
Yes, definitely. Like I said, I've been lucky enough to have a corporate coach who's helped me over the past kind of 2 years. But also just having the support from colleagues. Yeah, it's definitely vitally important. Really is.
Absolutely. Now, that's all of the questions that we've got for you. Thank you so much, both of you, for asking them, and thank you everyone who sent in questions for us as well. But before we go, it's time to have a bit of a look at the poll that we shared earlier. Everyone's answered it now, so that's 100%. Thank you so much. You should be able to see the results on your screen now. So the question we asked you was, what do you think are the main barriers to more women entering engineering? Lack of career guidance, STEM bias, lack of knowledge of the opportunity, or there are none? Now, interesting that absolutely no one said there are none, and we've got a slight majority of people saying it's the lack of the knowledge of the opportunity. Now, Anna, I'm going to come to you first to kind of react on this, because I know that so much of the work you do is to be on a mission to, raise awareness of this industry to young people and the opportunities that are out there. So, what more can be done, if anything, to raise that knowledge of the opportunity?
I think it is starting from an early age. You go to the careers events on the 12, 13 years, year 12, 13, and the kids are already have grown up and they have a bit of an idea of what they want to do. And sometimes engineering is not there, but there was one of the girls on the video that they talked about building bridges and doing the STEM programs. I think these are all very, very important to get to the kids when they're really young, and they really enjoy building things by hand, and they can see the practicalities as well. And that will definitely help.
I suppose it's probably in a way equatable to learning a language, because they always say that if you start learning a language really young, you're more likely to not only be better at it, but also have more of a passion for it. Natalie, do you think that this is kind of the case as well, that there is it's not started young enough?
Yeah, and I think one of the questions earlier to Anna about the stereotypes, I do believe that it's probably not just kind of school age children. I think parents have a massive role to play in breaking down gender stereotypes generally. And it's just so important that girls and boys are treated the same. Unfortunately, there's just so much kind of societal pressures in terms of, I mean, even toys are gendered into pink and blue, and clothes, and the whole kind of, it's just an absolute minefield. And if you think about it too much, it gets a bit kind of overwhelming. But parents do have a massive role as well to kind of say, oh no, yeah, engineering is a girl's career as well as a boy's career. So
definitely, yes. And so I suppose my last question to both of you before we wrap up for the day is, these results that are on the screen, do they surprise you, or was that kind of what you expected when we launched that poll 45 minutes ago, Anna?
I don't think they're surprising me. I am a bit surprised that they would. I mean, the none. I'm sure a lot of women are watching, so of course they have personal experiences as well. So yeah, they are telling a truth.
What about you, Natalie?
Yeah, I actually clicked the lack of knowledge of the opportunity when I answered the poll. I think another thing that we could potentially do is kind of have the engineer as a protected status, because at the moment it's not. And I know there's been a campaign in the past, but I think that's kind of gone a bit quiet now. But you can't, no, not everybody can call themselves an architect, not everyone can call themselves a doctor. You have to have, it's a protected status, whereas an engineer isn't, and anyone can call themselves an engineer. So I think just the perception of what an engineer is to a lot of the general public is wrong. There's so much more to it than there is. So yeah, it's not really surprised me. I think that's one of the main reasons why people don't realise what engineering is.
Do you think there'll ever be that protected status that you just mentioned?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I'd hope so eventually, one day.
We can stay optimistic. Anna, do you think it ever will be?
Yeah, it's quite complicated because there's already a perception, and the actual title is used a lot in other professions as well. So I think it's going to be quite hard.
Absolutely. Well, we will see, won't we? I suppose it's again, it's that old time will tell phrase that we always hear, isn't it? Well, that's about all we've got time for today. Massive thank you, Natalie and Anna, for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves today, and have a lovely weekend. And thank you as well to you for watching. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We'll be back again soon, so make sure you stay tuned to see the reveal of what our next webisode will be about. But for now, have a lovely weekend, and we will see you next time.